full productive work during these 3 days. I hope it was interesting. So you were lucky to have good weather. So all of our presentations today will be recorded if you don't have any objections. So we also have guests from 2 institutions here which deal with relevant topics. So we have Mr. Gunnar Snagels, who is the head of Riga City Agency of Monuments, and who was also present at the exploration done by the team of Dr. Richard Freund in Jungfernhof, and we have representatives of Jonas Lidke Memorial, which is one of the major memory institutions in Latvia, and also deals with issues of sites and memory and monuments and so on. And so they also have in their team the representative of Austrian services abroad. So we have like +1 Austrian in the audience. So from my side, I can say that it was super interesting working with you. Although mostly I was mad to preventing you from working normally, but still I think I tried to help at some point. So we also will have here Kevin Frostig, who is very much inspiration behind the project and the manager and the one who is lobbying for the creation of the movement in Jungfernhof. And so any other talks I'll give floor to Ulrike probably, or to students, or so the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Ilya. It was really a pleasure to be here and to work on this project. We are very grateful to Carol, who contacted me 2 years ago and asked me if we can contribute to this project. Then we decided that it would be good to have a design course with master students from the University of Natural Science and Life Sciences in Vienna. So we are a group of 4 students, master students. We started somewhere in March in Vienna. Due to this COVID, we postponed everything. So we started with reading assignments to grasp this really challenging issue. The students were asked to analyze memorials of NS Holocaust sites as well, to get a feeling how to deal with these sites, specific sites, from a landscape architectural perspective. And I think it was really a challenging issue because it was a new issue for everyone and very fruitful. And yeah, so the students were very engaged in Vienna and in Riga. They only arrived on Monday early afternoons. We had 3.5 very intense days working on the projects, refining their They had design ideas and concept. They have prepared a presentation of about 10 slides. Every presentation will take 10 to 15 minutes. Every group will present their concept, and then I ask you to engage in discussion. It's still work in progress. The students still have 10 days to work on, to finalize it in Vienna, so they can revise the project, include your remarks, like work in progress. So yeah, so to start with Hannah and Arnold, please.
Okay, so hello and welcome to our project, which is called 3D Connections for the Jungfernhof area. I will shortly introduce ourselves. I work with Hanna Wolkinger and my name is Aaron Krippner. And as already said, we are students from the Prof in Vienna. Here you can see like first sketches from Monday. We have been there with Ilya and it was like a really nice day and and we made here some sketches and some photos and it was like the first impression when we came. It was a really impressive area. And, yeah, you can see here some sketches. Then was like the idea of connecting this area of Jungfernhof with the other two memorials, which are also like in this area, Humboldt Forest and Salastin Memorial. And we made like this access from Jungfernhof and it ends up like in this memorial. And when we look inside the area, which is like here, this is like kind of the area. We also wanted to connect the today with the past. It was like really important for us because we've been there and there were a lot of people like riding with the bike, going for a walk, especially like in this here at the riverside. And we thought nearly nobody knows something about the past. And so we wanted to connect the today with the past. And also made this access which ends like in the Salastin Memorial and Humboldt Forest. And we wanted to include like the ruins, then the tree growth, which was also like really impressive for us. And then it ends up like in the where we expect the mass grave like in this area. So we came up here with this ground plan, which you can see here. We wanted to make this access. Here you can see the ruins which are remaining. Then it crosses here, the tree grove, and it ends up like here to the mass grave. And now Hannah will continue with the details.
Yes, as Aaron said, our axis, and I will tell you something more about in detail. That's how we imagine the entrance to this axis, connecting to the path and on the riverside, which that we recognize it's really highly frequented and used by cycling and walking the dogs and doing sports and whatever. So this should be our entrance to the memorial site with a kind of info board made of steel, like this little sketch here in the right corner. And we imagine it like with vegetation and like in these small pictures you could get a small a small insight. And this is the first step, and if you go further in this axis, the second connection would be the ruins which are remaining. Here in the photo on the right side you can see the ruins which are elevated on a small hill, I would say, and are quite impressive, but without any information there. So we thought of including an info board as well, and this axis you can see on the right side is like you can walk on it, walk through, and the axis somehow ends at the ruin, and you have some information there, and it starts again after the ruins. When the growth, the tree growth, where you can walk through the trees and have different heights of vegetation and could stay here. As you see in the picture, when the sun goes down, it reflects on the floor and on the grass, and you have some information there as well. And if you look further, it's ending up in the mass grave, or where somehow the expectations are that there is a mass grave. And we wanted to highlight this and frame it so no one would walk and step on it, and let just the vegetation grow as naturally as it is, and have some information as well, because it's really needed that people recognize that something happened there. And as you can see, you can stand here and look in this direction where you look at the Salas memorial as well. Yes. So building connections is our project, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
So we're doing like that.
I think it's better because we can project in
Please feel free to,
Shall I take the mic or can
I'll give you starting line. It's not better than the usual. It's always so nice.
First of all, I'm absolutely amazed of the quality of work that's done here, and also the context of your understanding of the place, because you made these, you joined the dots, right, in this line. There should be another joint, right, which is the station, which is then a further field, you know, in the mainland. Otherwise, it's perfect understanding of the spot. Perhaps it is prematurely to think exactly of the very execution of the design of the spot, because we don't know much about it yet. But you understood perfectly the landscape, and that's the first big step in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Actually, have a question concerning this reflecting surface. So as I understand, the idea is that this pathway all through going up the hill and going under the trees and going up to the masquerade area, it's kind of reflecting, so people are walking on it and thinking of it or something. So I would mention two issues. For you to know, I'm the person who comes up with criticism and is bad, but just a bit from my experience. First of all, can there be issues, for example, people being kind of afraid walking on reflective surface? So I mean, how, if you could a bit detail what sort of surface it is, and second, is it slippery or not? Because with our climate, with our winters, it's kind of an issue for the surface not to be slippery. So if you could detail, for example, what materials can be used to implement your idea, but to, for people not, sort of say, women in skirts, for example, not being challenged walking.
In reflection or in lighting, we don't mean like actual light, we mean like light stone, like a light gray or something, which is really lighter than the surrounding. And so you can see it from like meters away, and not like actual light, and not slippery material, we mean like stone material, but just a light stone.
Yeah, like concrete, and we wanted to work also like with this cartoon steel, and yeah, it could be all concrete. Yeah, the exact surface we will work on.
When we were walking to the site, we saw these materials as well, like at the train station, and yes, at this memorial, and you imagine it somehow like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that. Karen, the question is to Karen.
Yes. Can everyone hear me? Can I speak?
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful presentation. It is thrilling to see it. I think it is graphically beautiful and clear and instructive. And did what I hoped, which is that the landscape piece is about joining all the elements. And you did a great job joining the different memorials nearby, but also at the site, and this respectfulness about how we combine the past with the present. So there is already a promenade and there is already present activity, and you were able to really bring those two worlds together. You also provided a lot of context, and I think that is so necessary in memorials, is that we understand context. So what is that ruin nearby, and what is the history of the site in relationship to the history of the camp? And you really opened that discussion. I was extremely interested in your portrait of the mass grave. To me, this is a major turning point in the project. And I see it's a rectangle. And I've been looking at the ERT images, and they are rectangular. It is described as a rectangle, but it's an irregular rectangle. So I think, you know, being true to that contour will be an important thing to preserve. I also really liked your idea of this, how to protect the land so people do not walk on it, but how to allow the vegetation to go unchecked and have it become a natural kind of outgrowth of this kind of history. I had originally thought about a canopy. Do we just get disconnected? No, maybe not. Okay. I had originally thought about a canopy, which would prevent that kind of growth. So your idea was very appealing to me. I think those are my main reactions. And in terms of two other things, in terms of whatever memorial we develop, we will need to think about traffic and how do we create pathways that help people move around the space. How do we create lighting? How do we create signage? Those are all additional components that will enhance how people experience the space. And in terms of writing and the metal plaques that you sort of inserted, we're still going to be researching the camp and researching, for instance, letters from some of the victims. There may be lines that we extract that could be quotes that we include in those kinds of ways. So just suggesting that makes us more attentive to that possibility as we develop the research. But thank you. This is a wonderful start and a very impressive development of ideas and connections between all of these sites.
Yeah, very impressive presentation. I went to the place from the station, which is at the top of the map, and I hadn't thought about entry from Riverside Walk, because you could have foot traffic on that walk, so that's a very good idea. But I would suggest also an alternative entry point coming from the station.
Yeah.
But about the thing marking out the graves, where you had a metal thing around it, have you seen sites at Rumbula and Victornik, which have got similar things but in concrete? And the question is there any reason to have a similar sort of design, or as you put it there, have it in metal? Which is the question.
When it comes to connection or connecting these places, we wanted not to do exactly the same. So this one is like outstanding on its own, but somehow connected. So the same idea, but a little bit different, I guess.
Any other comments? Yeah, I guess Ulrike and Julia are not allowed to comment as professors. From the colleagues? Okay, Mrs. Van Aron, thank you so much. We pass the mic.
I just want to add a general comment to all presentations. Due to the shortage of time, we asked students to show their design, their ideal design from that concept, and only go in detail to what not everything because there's not enough time. So that can see the like, what direction.
If you're afraid that we don't have time today, so
So
it's wrong, but yeah, but okay. So that's true.
Hmm.
now
Just turn on.
We're now going to present our design concept for the site of Jungfernhof concentration camp. Our design concept is called Retelling History. And so at first we're starting with an analysis of the site. So when we were there, the first thing we noticed was that it is a quite peaceful and idyllic place, which is kind of a contrast to the history. And we also saw that there are many natural elements that are very beautiful and also contributing to the idyllic scenery. There's also a nice view over the river and you can see the city. And we also found some different atmospheres. So there are open spaces with meadows, and there are also some denser places with the tree groves. And we also noticed that there were many people using the space for recreation and for sports. There were people passing by. And we thought that this is a positive aspect because the site is already known that people go there and they use it. And so this is a potential for a memorial. And our design idea started when we were preparing or when we were doing some research. We were handed some text also by Karen and also some witness reports. When we were reading them, we kind of felt that we wanted to retell their stories, and we came up with the idea to integrate quotes from survivors that describe the situation during the concentration camp times and work with that.
The design concept was that we tried to implement 5 commemorative stops, and you can see them located here on the map. And the idea was that the 5 stops should reference the events that happened on the site, and they should reference them in different ways. And we thought about implementing some sign elements and interventions and also signage to show what happened on this particular part of the site. So, and also what we want to say is that those stops don't have a particular order, that you can just walk around from one to another. Doesn't matter where you're coming from, if you're coming from the riverside or from the parking lot side. And yeah, so the first, I say not the first and second stop, but there's an order. So what the first stop is on top. This is like the arrival spot, and then in the middle there is it a filter? Yeah. No. Okay. Here is the arrival spot. And then there we said this would be the spot where the barracks were located, like they were located around this area. And then here are the tree rows, and we thought about we're here next up there, with as a reference to the behind where the people were shot, and here where the ruins, there should also be a stop, and then here where the potential mass grave is. Yeah, here are some short, like very not very beautiful sketches, but we have details later just to show you what we thought about for each of those stops. And the first stop, the arrival spot, is, as I showed you before, when you come from the parking lot. And there we thought about implementing a rocky path to reference the walk that the people had to take from the station to the concentration site. And on the side, we thought about implementing signage where, as she mentioned before, where there you could read the quotes from the witnesses' reports. And the next stop is the barracks. And we read in the witnesses' report that a lot of the people referenced the beds or probably beds or the places where they slept as like they were so small, like bookshelves. So we thought about creating huge bookshelf, like looking like bookshelves, and as a reference to that, and also where we could reference those quotes that were written in the report, but also we would see details later sketch, and the next as a reference to the Rumba forest. And here we thought about implementing tree trunks that would resemble the victims that were shot there, and they should be like in human heights, like 80 or 50. So when you go there, you pass through all those trunks, and on the trunks there should also be written like those quotes, and also about like some information about what happened there. And the next stop is the river Galgala. Yeah, and this is at the end of the ruins, so those should be the ruins, and at the end there's like a platform where you have a very nice view to the river. So actually, when people go there, this should be like reference a huge crane. And when people go there, they have this beautiful view to the river through the frame. And then there we also wanted to insert a quote where the people describe in the witnesses' reports that it was so cold that the water was frozen from the river, the drinking water was frozen that they had. So we had to drink water from the river, and then diseases spread. So we wanted to write this to the frame so that people see this difference, this beautiful view, and actually to the river, which to us is not very beautiful, but at the time, the place, the river was the reason for a lot of people dying on diseases. And the last stop is the memorial, the main memorial site where probably the mass grave will be located. And yeah, this should be a place where people can commemorate in silence and walk around. We thought about installing a wooden path that goes around the rectangle, and in the middle there should be like a wildflower field, and I don't know what is it called, like what it's called? Yeah,
It's like a benefit.
yeah, like a bench. Where there is supposed to have a detail about later.
So with the materials we wanted to use the same materials for all the stops, because as we're not connecting them with a path or something, as we want it to be spontaneous, that people wonder what is there, and then they go there, and then they're they have an interest in that object, and then they read the quotes and resulting in an interest for the history. But to kind of connect them in a design way, we wanted to use the same materials for all the objects. And we're thinking about steel sheets, some kind of dark steel, and also combined with some light wood, so that the especially the wood stems or the tree trunks, we were thinking about that in the tree growth. We just using those stems and also using the same wood with the other objects. And for the mask grave, we're thinking about a white flower bed, and when we were at the site, we noticed that there were many beautiful flowers in the meadow, and we wanted to use them and so use more of the flowers, so that it is a flower bed but with natural flowers. And so bit into detail where the forest or the tree grove is, wanted to resemble the Umbala forest, where many people were shot during a mass killing. And like Lena already said, the tree trunk should resemble those victims. And so now I'm going to read the quote we're thinking about integrating there. We were told that 1,500 people were brought to a fishnet factory in Vienna. Later, we heard that those people were shot in a mass killing in forest. So the intention is that people go there because they don't know what this object is, and then they read the quote, and then they start to think about the history of this place. And the next one is the actual memorial site, so the mass grave. We also have a quote for that, which kind of also sums up the horrible things that happened there. Dynamite arrived for the purpose of blasting out a depression to use as a mass grave. Potatoes were planted atop of the grave. So this is kind of a really absurd situation, and in our thinking, it resembles those horrible times in history. And the third detail is where the barracks are standing, and the kind of bookshelf resemble the bunk beds where the inmates had to sleep in, and also there people can also lie in there and experience that feeling themselves and see how the people had to live in those times. And that's it from us. Thank you.
Any questions, any comments? Kevin, yeah, go on, please.
So I should talk, okay. Excuse me. I heard things in and out. It wasn't completely clear. Again,
Maybe you can turn off the video, otherwise it's lagging. So please try turning off the video and then talk. Not because we don't want to see you, but because we have unstable connection.
okay, is that better?
Yeah.
You can hear me better,
Go.
okay. Okay, so another wonderful presentation with original ideas and a great graphic presentation of your ideas. And you also integrated some new concepts. And I was particularly struck as, you know, in contrast to the other presentation, you identified a different entry point. And so it'll be very important as we develop the memorial, what will be the entry point to the memorial, because it is such a large park. I also appreciated the different key elements that you addressed, and that you made an attempt to introduce discomfort. And one of the lessons that I learned when I was working on the Vienna project, and I don't know if you're familiar with Nora Sternfeld, she's a cultural historian in Austria, is that she really addressed the conflict or the issue around aesthetics and dealing with histories of murder. And how do we, you know, in the midst of this beautiful, picturesque recreation park, how do we introduce such a dark subject without, you know, succumbing to beauty? So the issue of aesthetics is an important one. And so the idea that you created an entranceway with a rocky path that would be kind of disorienting to people as they entered was very interesting to me. Also, the barracks, that you introduced an experiential element to the barracks so that people could sit and lie and experience what that might be like. So it'll be important that we really accurately find the dimensions of the barracks. The other component, and I don't know if this is possible, is that one part of the issue of the barracks is that the roofs were leaking and that there was icy, you know, water coming in. You know, how do we add to that experience? Also with the water and the notion of contamination, that was another extremely interesting element. You know, how do we represent contaminated water? How can we do that actually at the site? Is that important? And introducing the Dunamunde experience, I think, is incredibly important, because what we often think about when we think about the Holocaust is we think about murder, but we don't think about other aspects, like how people were lied to, like theft, you know, all of these other components that were part of this industry, of this machinery of murder. So the Dunamunde was an interesting addition. And also, and this is something for Latvians to talk about, there are so many trees in Latvia. And so how do we create information in a forest, in trees, so that we understand the multiple roles that trees played in Latvia's history? So those are my quick responses. And I really liked the presentation of the mass grave, the idea of maybe using a fence as a storytelling component. Very stimulating, great new ideas, wonderful presentation. Thank you.
I would also like to comment very briefly on the idea of bunk beds, because, you know, there is a long and discussion that basically does not have a proper answer to what extent the Holocaust Memorial should recreate the Holocaust experience. Yeah, and for example, in Jungfernhof concentration camp in Poland, to which also many Latvian Jews, German and Austrian Jews were sent. For example, you can there like lie in bunk bed, and a colleague of mine whose mother was in prison there, she did that, and she felt like a very weird experience, and she did that, not describe it as a memorial experience she wanted to get, but the temptation was too big. And on the other hand, in Janis Lipke Memorial here in Riga, there the bunker the Jews were hidden in kind of pressure and discomfort in a very peaceful and settings. All of you emphasized how nice is the area, but I actually like that idea. You mentioned the bookshelves, and thinking of this area as a public area, if you can make it as a kind of public, you know, it's called book slapping library, it also can be an interesting option. Yeah, so people kind of symbolically reuse this instrument of oppression, of humiliation, as something kind of positive. Yeah. So this also seems to me very interesting, all these layers and connotations. Thank you so much. Really beautiful presentation, a lot of great ideas.
Yeah, very nice presentation. Yes, the idea of the personal experience, I thought that is very, very good, very important. But it's more impressive than just playing statistics. About the bunk beds, the occupation museum a reproduction of Siberian barracks or bunk beds, which has always been popular with people. And it's also been described as giving the right sort of impression. But I've got a practical question about the barracks bunk beds. You all have children playing on them, climbing up to the top. Are there any safety concerns? And the other things that will be outside in the wind and the rain, what sort of material would you expect them to be made of?
And so the material, we said it would be wood, like the shelf would be wood, and the frame would be like made of steel. And about the like the topic with the children, then we also thought about it, and we don't have a solution yet. It was just an idea. I mean, they're not like, you can build them not so high, because we plan it like for one like 80 meters or 2 meters high. It could be lower, so that it's not so horrible if you fall down. But yeah, that's a problem. We have no solution yet.
But a solution might also be to add like a ground, like there is in playgrounds, so that would be a possibility, because I think playgrounds also have stuff to climb on, so there's definitely a technical solution for that, I think.
Thank you for good work. The 5-step approach to this area would be a perfect blueprint if we would thought about it like 50 years ago, when this land was intact, right? When there would not have been any public space created. But now I don't want to work here as a Spaßmodell, somebody who is killing the joy of just blue sky thinking out of the box. But when it boils down to practicality, is that the municipality would allow us to do one step, perhaps out of these 5, and that would be that memorial place of the grove. And you suggested a fantastic idea how to make it disappear. It would be a meadow. It wouldn't be a gravel, okay, it wouldn't be stone, which would stand out, but you would make it a meadow. And that I found a genius idea, and that we would sell it to the municipality. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, there's really signs of municipality. We don't know what municipality to accept or not to accept. I think Gunnars would be, in this audience, the one who would be most qualified to speak about it. But actually, we don't know. So I think that's why this project for us was important, because you came in a moment when this site is like kind of a limbo. Yeah, so we discussed the development project that existed is put on hold for them. Now, what happens with this project? So we actually cannot be sure what can and what cannot be implemented. And I think it's good.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no reason, there's no a priori reason why something will not be allowed. The responsible agency, the responsible council, which is the Riga Monuments Council, which I'm just a member, would look at any sort of proposal.
Now it's becoming a bit more complicated. We discussed on the very first day. So the administrative changes that actually had a great impact on this area but I think it's we don't have to think that all of that is pure fantasy. I mean, any other? Okay, Martin,
Okay, I just wanted to say that it felt very, very personal, like on a human scale. It's not just a polite place where to go and commemorate, but you actually feel that these bookshelves, etc., it's on your skin. And that's why when I hope it will somehow end up in reality, and I hope there will be these votes also, because that's the connection from that person to me. When I can feel myself in his or her shoes, the only thing is that don't lose the names of these people that you quote, because that's the most important thing. Yeah, this I know this person. That's because the Holocaust somehow took away the personality of these people. Also, even the survivors, we are calling on the numbers. But the most important thing is that I know, oh, this is Trudy, for example. Yeah, I know one of the survivors. Only I heard about her. I didn't have a pleasure to meet her. So it would be my suggestion: stay as personal as you can.
Okay, so thank you, and we're passing the floor to the.
Yeah.
Maya also speaks as a mother of a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old kid who knows what kids at the memorials mean.
So we are a third group. My name is Helena Zula and this is Pagani. And we would like to present you the third proposal. So as also our other two groups presented, we had some sketches and thoughts about when to decide. And the first was, wow, such a beautiful recreational space, beautiful water body, beautiful river. And also when we passed to the potential mass grave and like the surrounding, we even couldn't realize that in this place could something happen like it happened. So our thoughts were that this space is completely missing something about the past or about the history. But also we found that still some suggestions are there as ruins, trees, or also the study of the possible mass grave, and still also a trail. And so these were our first thoughts. When we started to think about how to make this concept or the trail or commemorative walking, because in the end we call it commemorative walking. It starts from the train station because we, I think already first day, went to the train station when we saw the Soviet commemorative monument, but there was nothing about the event from 1941. So we thought to start there on the train station. So this would be a journey because the train arrived to the train station. The second section or second part would be this. This is the journey. This would be the arrival, and this is the stay. And this is our walking that we want to do. And the first part starts from the train station, and here we would like to introduce also the sign. And it should look like this. So you enter and you arrive to the train station, you see some information, or we didn't follow in details how this should like, because we hadn't so much time. But the first what you should see is this line, which should represent some informations about the arrival, about exact day, and also that it was 30 of November, and what the weather was and how it was. And so we would continue this trail through because now the surrounding is mostly the housing spaces and the schools. So we would like to conduct this line through all this first trail. And here we start, you can see already the second part, which is the, yeah, sorry, it's riding, but it's still not a journey. It's the second part, and after the shopping mall and the section, which is here, you have the first sign, which is not so clear to the concentration camp. Like, there is no written concentration camp, but there is a sign to the side. I'm so sorry, to the Jungfernhof, but it's invisible. So we would like to make here the second step, like with the information about that some of the prisoners and victims were conducted to the other camp where they had to build this camp, and we want to make this information here. And after the line is continuing here till the point that you arrive to this section where it's all the road like this, and through all this road you see the wall. So we thought that in this section we can continue the line on the wall, and on this wall we would continue also the text, which should remember that period, what happened in these 3 months. And yeah, and now it's like arrival. After arrival, it's stay, and it's the third part.
And yes, so the third part, stay, is a bit different, but also like a walking experience. But in the third part, like in the stay part, we want to that people experience the survivors, like what they said in the reports, and through sound. And so we have like 6 stops, which like, oh, the first one's okay. And so we have 6 spots that like guide you through the site. And okay, like the first one, or it is also not like we don't have like numbers, but it would be like here, and you have like some sound installation that like you can see here, and it would be a arrival story of a survivor, like it would be about arrival at the site, and then here it would be a story about the barrack, and here about the mass grave, and here about the hospital and the watermill, because there was like the sewing workshop where they repaired things. And here, like about the manor house and the river, like we heard before about the poisoning. And here it would be like an ending or like a continuation point to Rubula or Salastis, because there could be like a walking trail to those sites also. Yes, and it's like, and the points where they look, they will be guided by viewing points to look at those sites. So, like you can see here, we have chosen the mass grave, and that you like have stepping stones that guide you through those stops. And then you have like a sound installation that will tell you the story, and also like a guiding where to look at. And here we would have like the master break. It would also be like in the other group a meadow, and we would like surround it with this stepping stones to that you can see it. And yes, so here and then to our materials, it would look like this, but in a color that is continuing through the whole experience. And this is an example for the meadow in the evening. Yes, so thank you for your attention.
I think the idea is very interesting. So obviously, you thought very much about how people will find their way. It's clear from the presentation and thought how they would find their way, how they would see which and where to look. With the last point about the march way, and everyone pointed to it. And I think the idea is very interesting with the strip and text telling them the story of the place and what happened there.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think it's very important to have this connection from the railway station to the actual place where everything happened. The railways are planning some changes to the railway station. So in the next 1 or 2 years, they will be putting up some fencing. They'll be putting up a footbridge, which will necessitate the moving of our information stands. And I tend to see that when the information stands are moved, there's also something about info Malaysia, which could be the starting point of this walk. It's very good.
Actually, you were the first ones to hear this information. But lots of them also do.
I think we follow. Thank you first of all for a great presentation, which in a way for me at least it closes the circle. The first one we started with those 3 other dots. Now it's right. And following up on what just Gunnar said, it is a matter of practicality. And how work as this place can work as a tourist destination and a tourist route, right, which leads down to the river, the actual site, and the rest is just a matter of practicality, what works best at that site. But a great way that you can.
Yeah, so because most of the memorial objects that I've seen at the train stations, and of course, I mean, Germany and Austria have a lot of these interpretations, as most of these are abandoned stations where these are relatively small objects, which are just approached as a city sculpture. So it doesn't matter that there are trains around. And I mean, here, it's clearly goes from station through the tracks. So it's kind of interesting layers. Yeah, so I think it's a good point, something to reflect on. Karen? Karen, unmute yourself and talk, please.
Okay. Now, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I'm yelling across the Atlantic, so please. I don't know how loud I'm talking. Another wonderful presentation. I am struck by the contrast of education in Austria around this subject, and in the US, we are so focused on assessment that it is unusual to have three so startling different presentations coming out of one class. And it really speaks to the kind of democratic process of education in Austria, and just how unusual each presentation has been. I love the fact that this starts at the Skierotava train station. I think you might be aware that we're going to do our opening event there. And Ilya can talk a little bit more, about the complicated political history of that station. But for this project, that is where it began. So that walk from Skierotava to Jungfernhof is a really important element to preserve. And I love the idea of these audio, audio towers. We are in touch with two brothers who survived, and one who is 6 years old, who actually describes that walk. And so for any survivors that can do that, it would be great to have those voices as part of the audio that we develop. The question about the audio and, what languages will that be in, and also the image of those sound towers. We want people to see them and be attracted to them. They looked a bit authoritarian. So how do we make them so that they're inviting and bring us to them? What is that going to look like? And I don't have those skills, so it's really interesting to entertain these ideas. The other thing that is really important, and this is such a wonderful opportunity to be developing this memorial, because it grows out of the counter-memorial movement and how Europe has really cultivated these very, there's a kind of pattern of what memorials look like. And we're now at a point where we can really break away from that tradition and develop a very fresh approach to memorialization. And memorials are expensive, but in some ways, what your presentations have done is you've emphasized participation, how to make things a little more interactive. So to invest in those components rather than in fancy building materials will be really important. And I really believe this notion of commemorative walking is a wonderful idea, a contemporary idea. And again, the audio opportunities are really interesting, how those will get developed. Thank you.
Any other questions? Actually, following up on what Karen said, I think that the costs probably are decreasing because the materials are becoming more available and cheaper. So I think actually in the time it would be cheaper to do a memorial object. Yeah. So although it's obviously still a concern, but I don't know to what extent, by the way, you during your education process you deal with issues like that. Ulrike, should I give the mic to you, probably? No. It's, I mean, it is sort of a question. You can answer it or you can go on. I mean, we have like a pre-formed.
Thank you to students. It was great to work with you and to feel your engagement within this 3.5 days here in Riga and before in Vienna. So I think I'm so happy to be part of this process, and I do understand Karen's project as a process of working on this commemoration of the site. And I think one result is that, I mean, apart from building a monument, is that we have learned something through working at the site, through engaging with the topic, and we bring that back to Vienna and spread it among our colleagues, and we have learned from our life working time with landscape architects. And I think that's a great impact for us, and we are happy to contribute these presentations and projects to Karen's project. It can be online. And sure, within students project, we work up to the costs of projects, but then we have a lot more time. And as we think could go in details with the design concept. So it makes no sense to talk about costs, and it wasn't the aim of it. It was just being to engage with the topic. And I think it's great that we have three different approaches. Yeah, thank you very much.
I definitely can exactly what Ulrike said, and Karen concerning how different are these approaches. So I mean, in 3 days, you've developed completely different views of the area with different points of emphasis, with different approaches, with different media. I mean, be it sight or hearing or touching an issue of surface. So I mean, that's really amazing. And and for me, it's important that most of these aspects are those that so far have been not so present in Latvian memorial space in general, public space. Yeah, so we still deal with more traditional approach to commemoration, and the fact that you absolutely didn't have anything figurated, sort to say. It's also very, very interesting. So this is very much, all 3 projects are the ones that address emotions, not your understanding what you have learned about memory, how memory should look like. So it addresses people who absolutely know nothing more about the site, more about the memorial tradition, and who are not pressured by the rules how you should behave at a huge memorial with sculptures of whoever. So I think it's also very interesting. It's really, I mean, no one can promise anything, obviously, but already this discussion and these projects is sort of contribution to Latvian memorial space. I would say at least 5 of us Latvians represented here will walk away with ideas boiling in our heads. So that's absolutely amazing contribution. Thank you so much. Applause to all of you. You're the ones who. So with that, probably we will end the event and say goodbye to Vienna and Boston represented here. Karen, Julia, thank you for being present. Yeah. So you can wave at me for something. So yeah, probably we then. Yes. So now when we're done with the event, I have like 2 practical questions. So one would be, to what extent you would be ready to share the final results? Yeah. So for example,
So I think they finished their presentation. Karen, you're mute. Just.
It was fabulous, don't you think?